Welcome to this new automotive news video for Thursday, March 19th, 2026. And today we're going to talk about a lot of very different topics. For example, we're going to talk about Audi, which has announced that it will completely redesign the look of its future models. We'll discuss BMW permanently, discontinuing an electric model, and a new report revealing car repairs in France are more expensive than ever. We'll also explain why this is happening. And finally, of course, we'll talk about Stellantis. Yes, because the figures for the European market for February 2026 have just been released. And surprise, Stellantis made a spectacular comeback, especially thanks to a pretty impressive increase in sales of one of its models sold for less than 5,000 euros. So, we'll take a look at this comeback and we'll also talk about these figures as a whole. We'll review the European car market during this period, the brands that performed the best and the brands that, on the contrary, saw their sales decline. I'll also cover the growth in sales of various engine types. I hope you find this video interesting. If you do, please support my channel for free. You can do that by leaving a like on this video, subscribing for future ones, boosting this one if the option appears for you, and of course, leaving a comment to share your thoughts on today's news. We'll start with a topic about Audi and the design of their vehicles. Audi saw its global sales drop by more than 2% in 2025, after an 11% decrease in 2024. A drop that, according to the group, is partly due to the design of their current vehicles. That's what Marco Schubert, one of the top executives, a director at Audi, explains. He believes that design remains the main driving force for Audi customers when making a purchase. To boost its sales, Audi therefore plans to completely rework the design of its future cars based on the overall aesthetics of the Concept C. The Concept C is this car. It's the concept that previews the future TT, so a rather sporty model. Marco Schubert confirmed that the brand's future models, whether SUVs or sedans, will adopt the aesthetic codes of this concept. Seaside air intakes on the front bumpers, a mustache for the grille. Fortunately, there shouldn't be the matching lock of hair to go with it. Raised front and rear lights, more tapered, thinner, but also longer, as well as fairly rounded front fenders that end at an angle at the rear of the vehicle. That's what future Audi models will look like. Hoping that Audi doesn't stop at just the design of its vehicles, there's still a good chance that part of the drop in sales seen by Renault is closely linked to the technological lag it has, compared to its German competitors, especially when it comes to the versatility of its electric vehicles. Let me remind you that with the competition Mercedes, there's an entry-level CLA that's 100% electric offering, almost 800 kilometers of range for 54,000 euros. And right now, there's absolutely nothing comparable at Audi in terms of range-to-price ratio. At Audi, the best you can get in terms of range is 760 kilometers on the Audi A6, and that's at much higher prices, since it starts at 81,000 euros. And at those prices, or even a bit less, around 70,000 euros. At BMW, you get even more range with the iX3, which actually exceeds 800 kilometer range. Speaking of German electric cars, I wanted to mention that BMW will discontinue one of its electric models. The i4 will disappear just 5 years after its launch to make way for the future i3, for the simple reason that BMW wants to avoid duplicates, and these two vehicles will target pretty much the same customers. So the i4 will disappear sometime in 2026. As a reminder, the base version of the i4, the eDrive 35 version, offers 286 horsepower, a 67 kilowatt battery that provides 514 kilometers of WLTP range, all starting at 57,000 euros. But we can assume that with the end of this model, dealerships will sell them off, and there will probably be a way to get some nice discounts on this model. Before talking about Stellantis' comeback, I wanted to quickly tell you about a new study that just came out. It's a study conducted by the SRA, the Automotive Safety and Repair Organization. A study that was based on the analysis of 1.4 million claims in 2025, which shows that repair costs have soared by another 6% between 2024 and 2025. And if we zoom out a bit, that's over 30% between 2021 and the end of 2025. So why is it increasing? For several reasons. The first is that the French car fleet is aging, with an average age close to 13 years. Obviously, older cars have more things that need to be repaired. The cost of labor has increased by about 25% in 4 years. And above all, modern parts are much more expensive and they mostly work as a unit. Vehicles are becoming more and more sophisticated, but also increasingly equipped with electronic parts. Sometimes, to replace a small sensor or a small probe, well, we have to change the whole module that goes with it, and of course, that ends up being very expensive. To finish with this topic, you should know that the SRA explained that the cost of replacement parts for combustion vehicles has increased by 30% in 6 years. But despite this increase, on average, electric vehicles are still more expensive to repair. On average, 15% more expensive. mainly due to the use of specific materials and parts dedicated to electrification, and greater technical constraints, especially for diagnosing and repairing the batteries. All right, to finish, let's talk about the sales figures for the European market in February 2026. Numbers that, for once you'll see, are going to make you happy. At Stellantis in Europe, in February 2026 compared to February 2025, almost 2% more cars were sold across all brands. One of the groups that performed the best is indeed Stellantis, which showed one of the biggest increases for a major car group, with an 11% rise. This is thanks, for example, to Citroën, whose sales of the C3 Aircross and C5 Aircross have increased significantly compared to last year. But also to Ferrari. There, it's an increase of more than 50% in sales, notably thanks to the arrival of the large Panda, which was barely on the market at this time last year. On the Opel side, it's a 20% increase in sales, notably thanks to the arrival of the Opel Frontera. In addition to this general increase seen among most of these mainstream brands, Stellantis has also seen a strong rise in sales of its Chinese brand Leapmotor. Notably, sales of the T03, which have almost increased tenfold during this period. The T03 is a small car. It's one of the cheapest electric cars on the market, on which Stellantis reduced prices in 2026, and from which Stellantis has greatly benefited. It must be said subsidies, since 3/4 of these T03s sold during this period were sold in Italy, where there was a special operation that could push public subsidies up to 11,000 euros, bringing the final price for the customer down to only 4,900 euros. The brand even supported this offer with an advertising campaign which said that this model was almost cheaper than a bicycle. So, Stellantis had a great month in February 2026. He's not the only one who did well, because on the Chinese brand side, it's a celebration, it must be said. In general, Chinese manufacturers, who are still marginal for now, saw their sales increase by 94% across all Chinese brands. The most spectacular thing is that they now have 8% market share compared to about 4% a year earlier. They doubled in a year, absolutely incredible, with 2 Chinese brands outperforming the rest. BYD with a 164% increase, 18,000 sales, and Chery with a 282% increase and 16,000 sales. On Renault's side, it's a drop of about 10% with 91,000 units. The A390 flop continues, since on a European scale, they only sold 40 of them. During this period, Dacia dropped sharply, down 22%. And that's despite the launch of the Bigster, which slightly limited the decline. Without it, we'd probably be around -30 to -40%. To finish with the other 2 big car groups, Toyota is at -1%, and Volkswagen is about +20%, -2% during this period. Interestingly, I've saved, let's say, the juiciest information for last. There's a brand that saw its sales drop by 98%. I'll give you a hint. It's Jaguar, for the simple reason that Jaguar no longer sells any new cars and is simply continuing to clear out its stock. They sold only 6 cars in February 2026, with 5 models out of the 9 in the lineup. I was going to say current lineup, but actually the old lineup, that sold 0 units. The Renault Clio was the top-selling model in that period. One thing to specify is that this combines both the sales of the Clio 5 and the Clio 6. There are no details. We don't know for now. So, whether the sales of the Clio 6 have finally taken off, or if it's starting rather slowly, as seems to be the case in recent weeks. On the energy side, there's quite a bit of progress. For electrified engines, conventional hybrids have increased by 8.4% and now make up well over half of sales. Electric cars have increased by 16%, and the ones that hold the record are the plug-in hybrids, up by 32.4%. This is mainly due to the surge in sales of Chinese plug-in hybrids, which increased by 313% with 20,000 units. And for entry-level plug-in hybrids, Chinese brands even account for 36% of the market share, mainly because in certain segments they are the only ones offering vehicles, while European competitors prefer to reserve plug-in hybrids for higher-end or larger vehicles. So February 2026 was less terrible than January, but it doesn't fully make up for it either. Total sales since the beginning of the year are still down by 1% compared to 2025. And the coming months, especially March, April, and maybe May, are likely to be extremely unclear and very hard to interpret. Since we can't yet measure the impact of the ongoing Middle East conflict, we would typically expect electrified vehicle sales to rise in the European market. But it's entirely possible that because of this increase in fuel prices, which will affect the transportation cost of almost all products and goods, Europeans' purchasing power will gradually be eroded, and they will have even less budget to allocate to renewing their cars. So we're going to have a particularly complex period, and it will also be almost unprecedented in the history of the automobile. So I think we're in for a few months of pretty exciting automotive news ahead. In any case, we've covered today's news. I hope you found the video interesting. If that's the case, I'm counting on you to show it as usual. By leaving a like, subscribing for the next videos, leaving a comment, and why not, by supporting my channel through the join button below. Thanks to those who take a look. See you tomorrow for the next video. Ciao.